We have a lesson that you'll all be interested in because the subject's entitled The Key to Happiness. I remember a long time ago when I was a young preacher myself, I had a Sunday night sermon entitled The Real Problem of Youth. And a guy sitting in the back whispered under his breath, I suppose he thinks he knows. So maybe if that sounds presumptuous to you, you'll forgive me until we get through the lesson. But I think from a biblical standpoint, I can show you how to be happy. And it's something that we all are interested in, right? Does anybody here want to be unhappy? I don't think I've ever really met the person who said, I want to be unhappy. But then again, I don't know that we know the difference always in our country. And I'm not talking about you because you're here today worshiping God, thinking about spiritual things, analyzing your life and asking yourself, is worshiping God part of what it takes to be happy in life? And if you're here, I would guess that you're thinking that's probably the possibility. So the one passage, Jackson, that I wanted out of that scripture that you read was very simple. Prove all things, or test all things, and then hold fast to that which is good. So the key to happiness is holding fast to that which is good. But how do you test it? It said test all things or prove all things. Well, you're either going to do it by human reasoning or by divine revelation. And that's the first choice we make. Or am I going to go by what I think or what I'm taught in school or by what God's Word says? And that's the first question you answer. And as you answer that one, you're going to lead yourself down a path either for happiness or unhappiness. But you have to realize that philosophers have been asking that question forever. The great question they ask is, what is the greatest good? We're here on earth. What's the best thing that I can do? And one of the answers that many philosophers have given is the greatest good is to find happiness in your life. So ask yourself, do I believe that or do I think it's something else? And you see that in the different philosophies. For example, in the Old Testament, or in the book of Acts, rather, you see Paul going to Athens, Greece, which was a center of philosophers, and one of the groups of philosophers were the Stoics. And they thought, well, you need to be happy, but to be happy, you can't get too excited about the good things. You can't get too low about the bad things. So you just try to have an even keel from the day you're born to the day you die. And in their minds, that was happiness. The Epicureans had a whole different approach. They said, let's eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die. And so doing that will make you happy. And so I want us to think about that because the question is a good question to pursue. But we'll begin by saying, sometimes we look in the wrong places for happiness, right? Have you ever tried to be happy and it didn't work? Sure. Well, the first thing is we need to realize that wealth is not what's going to make you happy. And all you have to do to believe that statement is just ask yourself, do I know any very wealthy people who are miserable? And if the answer is yes, then you know that his money didn't make him happy, right? Well, Solomon was one of the greatest men of all time. And if you go back to the book of Ecclesiastes, which I recommend you go back and reread sometime, because it tells you about life under the sun, life here on this earth. If you didn't believe there's life after death, you can still read Ecclesiastes and get some real wonderful advice on what you should be doing with your life. And so in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse 11, he said, Then I looked on all the works of my hands and all the labor which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. Solomon, what do you mean? Well, he said, I built, and let me read chapter 2 what he says he did. He said, beginning at verse 4, he said, I made my works great. I built myself houses, planted vineyards, gardens, orchards. I planted all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, the special treasures of kings and of the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. And then he says in verse 11, and all is vanity and grasping for the wind. You know why? Because what he really found out is having the wealth wasn't the joy. Reaching that goal was where he found pleasure. And the other problem is once you gather all that stuff, then you have to worry about what? Keeping it. And so later on in Ecclesiastes, he says the sleep of a poor man is better than the riches of a rich man. Because he stays awake all night worrying about keeping his wealth. And so wealth is not going to make you happy. And if that's what you think is going to make you happy in life, you'll be disappointed. And I'm not saying you shouldn't gain money. But what we're saying is that's not the end in life. That's not the greatest good for our lives. Money is an end to a means, not an end in itself. Excuse me. Money is a means to an end, not the end itself. And again, Jesus said the same thing in Luke 12, verse 15. He said, take heed and beware of covetousness. See, that can overwhelm you. I've got to grab. And again, in Ecclesiastes, Solomon said, no matter how much wealth you obtain, you'll always want more. And he should know. But Jesus said, take heed and beware of covetousness, because a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things which he possesses. You know, you see a bumper sticker from time to time. I haven't seen it in years. But a bumper sticker I read one time here in Kansas City said, he who gains the most things wins. I said, yeah, until you lose, and you lose it all. So Jesus said that's not so. And again, Matthew 4:4, Jesus told Satan, man shall not live by bread alone, but by what? How do you live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God? You have to read the Bible. You have to believe that's where the greatest good is, believing the Bible and doing what it says. That will be your greatest good. That will make you happy. Okay? Well, that's not it. It's pleasure. Would you say that America is a pleasure-seeking society these days? Oh my, yes. And there's nothing wrong with pleasure as long as it is a recreational habit. In other words, that's not what life's all about. That's what you do for relaxation. That's what you do to reward yourself for a hard week of work. I tell people I go golfing on Monday, generally speaking, because even though I enjoy it, it's something that gives me an opportunity to forget about all my responsibilities. If you don't think so, try it. Get out there and hit a golf ball, and you chase it in the woods, you chase it through the creek, you chase it in somebody's backyard, and you try not to hit it somewhere, and by the time you're through, I had a great time. What was so great about it? I didn't think about anything but that little white ball all day long. Vacation, recreation. If you don't like that, try hunting. I tried that. Kevin was a good hunter. One time he went hunting with me up here at Platte City, and a little rabbit jumped out in front of us and took off dancing back and forth down the trail. And Kevin got his gun up, and the rabbit was long gone before he got a chance to shoot it. I said, well, Kevin, you got to be ready. He said, Dad, let me go chase that rabbit. I said, Kevin, you're not going to catch the rabbit. Rabbits are smarter than... He said, no, let me go chase it. I mean, it had taken off. It wasn't a jackrabbit, but it thought it was. I said, all right, Kevin, don't run with that loaded gun. You kind of walk at the most trot. If you think you can catch that rabbit, go ahead and I'll wait here, because I'm not going to waste my energy. About 5 minutes later, I hear, boom. Guess who comes back with the rabbit? Okay, you're smarter than me. He loved hunting, and so that's what he did for recreation. And we all have our different... Some of us like to go shopping, right? Amazon didn't get to be billionaires for nothing. We buy stuff online. And sometimes you buy not because you need it, but because that's your recreation. Fine. All those things are good until you become an Amazon-aholic or a golf-aholic or anything else like that. That becomes your reason for being. Then you've gone too far, and that's what we see about pleasure. Pleasure is fun, but it's not the lasting purpose. And again, Ecclesiastes 2, Solomon said, look at all the things I've accumulated. I built myself houses, orchards, vineyards, servants. I even had servants born in my house. I had singers and bands, we'd say it today, and all these different things. But he said, when I got through accumulating all these different kinds of things, and by the way, in the first part of chapter 2, he says, I even tried wine, women, and song. But it's all worthless and not worth the trouble. What's wrong? Pleasure is not an end in itself. But let me back up. Well, I lost that. I want to read something that I thought was very interesting because it comes from a source that's not in the Bible, and yet it says the same thing. Now, the website I found is a gentleman who has spent his life trying to find out what is the greatest good. And having studied a lot of very well-known psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists, he found out that most people don't know the difference between having fun and happiness. And so here's what he says. It's true that happy people have fun, but many people experience fun who are not happy. Happiness and fun, in other words, are not synonymous. Fun is situational. Think about that. That's right. He said the movie was fun, especially that amazing climactic scene. The game was enjoyable because we had so much fun there. Generally, unhappy people can experience the adrenaline thrill of a parachute drop, but this blog is not about how to have more fun in life. It's about happiness. When the game is over and the car is bogged down in traffic, the fun is over. The fun situation ended, so the fun did too. But happy people are generally happy, whether at a ball game, having fun, or on the freeway, not having fun. Unhappy people have never learned this truth. They spend so much of life spinning their wheels in the loose sand of disappointment while reaching for happiness by pursuing fun, only to discover you can't find happiness in a thing that doesn't produce it. Fun enhances life for those already happy, but for the unhappy, it's a diversion from their unhappiness. Pursuing fun while thinking it will produce joy and happiness can leave a bitter taste of defeat or surrender or resignation in the mouths of those who are taught the wrong life lesson about the nature of the happy life. Resignation comes from the futility of the pursuit. It can never lead to successful attainment of happiness, so many people simply give up trying. Despair that so much effort has led to so little happiness can cause further bouts of unhappiness besides. Then he says it's perfectly fine to pursue fun. I even highly recommend it in moderation, as in all things, of course. Just don't confuse its pursuit with the nobler pursuit of happiness. Pursuing fun requires nothing of the person who pursues it. And here's the key point. But happiness requires personal growth and maturity and the exercise of spiritual, moral, emotional, and mental muscles. The pursuit of happiness causes us to change, to transform degree by degree into a better person and therefore into a happier person. Now, I couldn't have said it better if I'd read this out of the Bible, because this fellow has read all the philosophers. He's read all the different religious books that he could get his hands on. He gives a long list on his website of all the things he's sought, and this is what he's come up with. I thought, wow, he's smart. But you see, you can't find pleasure and say, that's going to make me happy. It's just a temporary fix. It is really something to cause you to forget about your problems. But when you get through with the pleasure, the problems are still there. And of course, popularity is not the way to go, although for our kids going back to school and college, that's a big issue. You don't want to necessarily be the most popular kid, but you sure don't want to be the brunt of everybody's jokes either, right? So you try to find your place out there, but realize even if you were the happiest kid, or rather the most popular kid at school, it's not going to last, and they're not necessarily happy because tomorrow they may not be popular anymore. Any of y'all ever been popular one year and then not the next? I have. I was in 6th grade. I was a popular kid because I was on the basketball team and was actually the star of that team in Blytheville, Arkansas. The next year I was in 7th grade and I was just one more of a bunch of kids. All the middle school, all the grade schools funneled into this junior high, and all of a sudden I'm nobody. So don't grab hold of that. But remember Esther chapter 5, verses 9 through 13, where a fellow by the name of Haman was number 2 to the king. And he was so happy because he compared himself to everybody else in the kingdom. And he went home and told his wife and friends, he said, I am the happiest fellow in the world because nobody is more popular than me. I'm number 2 to the king. And besides that, Esther has invited only me and the king to her banquet tomorrow, and I can't wait to go. You remember how that banquet turned out? Haman had no clue. But the next day when he went to that banquet, she had devised that banquet to expose him to the king as being a traitor who wanted to kill all the Jews. And it made the king so angry that he left the room, and Haman fell down at the queen's feet begging for his life. And when the king comes back in, he says, what are you doing? You're going to attack my wife while I'm here in the house? And you imagine the king who has absolute authority, and he says, I am furious about this. And somebody comes up and says, hey, king, if you look out the window right over here, you'll see a nice tall gallows that Haman built. Wouldn't that be neat if you hung him on that? The king says, that's a great idea. Hang Haman on the gallows, and he's dead. See what happens when you try to be happy? If you go the wrong way about it? Do you think Haman was happy? Haman was a very shallow person, and there's a lot of folks in America who are very shallow the same way. They'll do anything to get a vote. They'll do anything to be the most popular kid at school. But you need to remember this lesson, and that is you won't be happy unless that popularity comes with what we're going to talk about here in a little bit more. Well, David's concept of happiness, and you can write it down in Psalm chapter 1. Blessed, which means happy. And we're not talking about fun happy, giddy happy, telling one of my very uncorny jokes and laughing for a minute. Right? I don't have any corny jokes, right? They're all hilarious. Somebody says, there's another one. Happy is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Now think about that, because that applies to our lives today. Here's your life. Young people, you're going off to college. You get to choose. Do I want to be happy? It's up to you. Here's how to do it. Here's how not to do it. Don't walk in the counsel of the ungodly. Now think about it. Counsel. What is counsel? That's advice. That's an opinion. That's a statement. What do the ungodly say? The ungodly say, don't read that Bible. It's just a book of rules. You won't enjoy that. That's just stupid. It's old-fashioned, outdated, and who reads that stuff anymore? Don't go to church because it's full of hypocrites, and the church is just trying to run your life. You see, the ungodly have counsel they give, and David says, don't listen to that counsel. Why? Because it's from the ungodly source. And he said also, don't stand in the path of sinners, or the way of sinners. Sinners have a way, and the way is, let's go have a party. Let's go out and get drunk and have a great time tonight, and that's going to be fun. Except you wake up the next morning and you're trying to figure out on Google, what kind of recipe can I get to get over my terrible hangover? And did I really have fun last night? Because I don't think I even remember. You know, I'm always amazed at how people think they have fun. But the Bible says don't follow the path or the way of sinners. You know why? Because it's sinning. And if the Bible is right, sinning is not doing what God made you to do. So you're not going to have fun. You're not going to have happiness. You might have a temporary fun, a little buzz, but it's not going to be lasting happiness. And don't sit in the seat of the scornful. Now, the first thing you'll notice is the progression. Don't walk, don't stand, and don't sit. That's how people do. They hear an idea, and then they practice the idea, and then they're set in their ways because of those ideas and actions. Another piece of advice Solomon gave in the book of Ecclesiastes, he said, don't become an old king who will no longer take advice. I thought, are you talking about yourself, Solomon, or somebody else? He said a young person who is wise is better than the old king who is no longer able to be reproved. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, in other words. But the scornful, synonyms for scorn is mockery, making fun of things, laughing about it cynically, contemptuousness, derisive, sneering. Now again, who's going to do that? The sinner who enjoys being ungodly. He's going to, all those Bible thumpers, what do they know? That's what that is, scornful. Oh, I went to church and the song leader missed a note, and the preacher forgot his verse, and the people praying, I looked at while everybody was praying, and half the people didn't even have their eyes closed. So why go to church? That's scorn. Sometimes I hear us as Christians doing that to the world, and that's wrong. We shouldn't be scorning them. We should be sympathizing with them and say they need our help. They need salvation. So anyway, that's what you don't do. But then he said, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he what? Meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaves shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. That's how to be happy. Because that's a happy life. And King David, who was king of Israel, said by inspiration, this is what the Bible says it takes to be happy. But remember what our psychologist said on the blog a minute ago. He said in order to be happy, it takes work. It takes discipline. You have to be moral and spiritual and mental and physical in your desire to be happy. You don't just play a video game and all of a sudden you have a happy life. You don't shoot par in golf and all of a sudden have a happy life. You don't all of a sudden have the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, because as soon as they do this year or early next year, now what? Well, there's always next year, because this year won't make you happy for very long, will it? So keep that in mind. But again, look at this one more time. He delights in the law of God. He looks at God's law and he enjoys reading the Bible. Like, this is wonderful. There's so many good truths here. There's so many solid facts. And so what he's doing is filling his mind with ideas. And there's the key. Everybody has an idea. But if you're following the wrong ideas, you're going the wrong pathway. And so sometimes people say, well, my idea of happiness is getting drunk every weekend. And they do that. But they're really not happy. And if you think so, look at it. But he delights in the law of God because that fills his mind full of thoughts. And they're not bad thoughts. He begins to enjoy them. So much so that he meditates on it 24/7. Now, that doesn't mean he just has his head in the Bible all the time, but it does mean that his mind is thinking and dwelling on those thoughts. And since those thoughts came from God, our Creator, those are good thoughts to be thinking about. Did you know that good people think good thoughts? Scornful people think scornful thoughts. Mean people think mean thoughts. Unhappy people think unhappy thoughts. You know what's wrong with a lot of people? They're not happy, but they don't want to put the work into their lives to become happy. So it's easier to just gripe and complain and whine. Well, why don't you quit doing that and spend some energy trying to be happy? Well, what's that require? Read God's ideas and dwell on them during the day, and you're not going to have negative thoughts going through your head. It just doesn't work that way. There's the power of positive thinking. David knew about that long before any of our people came along saying that today. And the results are a steadfast and productive life. Not 5 minutes of pleasure or a year of pleasure or anything like a long-lasting, fruitful life that will be productive, so that if you die young or you die old or you die middle-aged, you're happy because you had a productive life, and the fruit of your life shows everybody this person lived a good life. So that's a wonderful thought. Who doesn't want that? I'm going to put good thoughts in my head. I'm going to experience the power of positive thinking, and I know the end result is going to be that everything I do is going to be good, because when I get off track, I'll go back to the book and find out what I need to be doing. Well, let's look at Jesus' concept of happiness in the New Testament. He used the same word, blessed, which means what? Anybody listening? Happy. Thank you. Happy. We call it the Beatitudes. Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. They don't sound too happy to me. Blessed are those who mourn. Oh, you know, some people like crying. You know one of those people? My wife, Emily. If she goes to AMC Berrywoods up here and we see one of those heartthrob movies and she doesn't cry, she wants her money back. And she'll watch a movie and I'll see her over there and she'll be over there going, I said, are you all right? Yeah, it's such a good movie. I know, honey, you're crying. Well, I bet you're crying too. No, I'm not crying. Now, I do have a knot in my throat because the dog died. I feel sorry too. You know, I start out with Old Yeller. You know, that poor dog dies. You remember that story? It hadn't got any better since. And if she's watching it, you know it's going to come out bad. Except there's going to be a happy ending somehow. But that's not what this is talking about. Blessed are the happy are those who mourn. Well, we'll figure out what he's talking about here in a minute. Blessed are the meek. I thought meekness was weakness. No. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Now I can see that. You know, because they'll obtain mercy. That makes you happy, right? Blessed are the pure in heart. And blessed are the peacemakers. And blessed are those who are persecuted. Now wait a minute, Jesus, did you miss the boat? Most people would say he did. That doesn't look like a list of happiness to me until you translate the phrases to what he's really saying. You ready for that? Here's what he said. Blessed are the humble. Would you agree with me that a happy person is somebody who's not full of himself and always obsessed with self? Absolutely. The irony is the self-possessed, obsessed narcissist wants to be happy. That's what he wants. But he's going about the wrong way. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about I. Jesus said the humble man is the man who's going to be happy because he's possessed with something greater than himself. Blessed is the mourner because he's mourning his bad situation. I'm not happy. I don't like what I've become. I don't like what sin has done to me. And that fellow, when he gets to that stage, is going to do what? He means it enough. He says, I'm going to do something to change. You know, the sad thing is we have to have a real life crisis most of the time before we decide to change. But you don't have to. You can change by your own choice today. Blessed is the meek. That's the fellow who has power under control. Moses was a powerful leader of Israel, but he was the meekest man on earth. And if you go back and read about Moses, you'll see why. You know why he was called meek? Because he could control his temper. And he had a lot to control because Israel was always whining. Why are we out here in this wilderness? There's nothing to eat. Boom, there's food. Tomorrow, I don't have anything to drink. Boom, there's water. My shoes hurt my feet. Boom, they're going to last a whole 40 years. I don't like what you're doing because you brought us out here in the wilderness to die. Boom, here's some more food. We're tired of this loathsome bread. Can we have some meat? Sounds like we're going to a potluck, doesn't it? Boom, there's quail. I'm surprised they didn't say, well, I like red meat. But that's how Israel was. All during the 40 years, Moses controlled himself because he was concerned about Israel. And when God said, Moses, stand back, let me destroy these people, and I'll build a new nation up through you. And he said, oh no, Lord, you're not going to do that. First of all, if you do that, your name's going to be blasphemed because the Egyptians are going to say that I brought these people out here to die. And I don't want your name tarnished. Number two, you promised these people that they would go in the land of promise, and even though they've sinned and they complain all the time, you need to keep your word for them. And God says, okay, you're right. You're right. We're going to endure this generation for 40 years because there's a whole generation of unhappy people who could never learn to be happy. And so God lets them die in the wilderness. And guess who went into the promised land happy? Their children. You know, that's another lesson. You don't have to do the wrong thing just because your parents do the wrong thing. You can do the right thing because you want to be happy. But it takes work. Self-discipline. Desire for justice. In other words, blessed are the righteous. We all have that sense of justice. Is there anybody in this audience who has never in your life said, that's not fair? Anybody? The kids are saying, no, I say it all the time. Yeah, we all do. Where'd you get that idea of fair? Fair means that's not right. Really? Where'd you get the idea of right and wrong? God instilled it in you when He made you after His own image. Because God is a God of right. He's a God of justice. He's a God of perfection. Of all the beings in the universe, God says, that's not fair. And He taught us to feel the same way. Well, a happy person wants to do the right thing. Now think about it. How many times have you done something wrong and felt guilty afterwards? Every time. Unless your conscience is seared, and that's even worse. I never met a seared conscience person who was happy. They're usually miserable wretches. And I've met a few. But if I do the right thing, for example, I walk into the grocery store and there's a fella with a wheelchair or he's got a walker, and I open the door for him and say, go right ahead. Well, thank you. So he calls me young man. Like, yeah, do that again. Makes you feel good, doesn't it? Open the door, or let somebody, you come to a four-way stop and two cars meet at the same time. Well, the rule says the person on the right should go, but not everybody knows that rule. So I just sit there and they look at me and I look at them and I finally say, no, go ahead. You go first. Well, thank you. It made my day. You do little things like that and it makes you happy because you feel like you've made somebody's day. The desire for doing the right thing because the gratification you get is inborn because you're made in God's image. Be kind to others. That's what mercy is. It's doing something for somebody because you have compassion on them. It's not just saying, oh, poor is that fella. It's poor is that fella and I'm going to extend mercy to them. Blessed is the man who is focused on his goal. And that's one of the great purposes in life. What is the man's greatest good? It's to reach his goal. Well, what's that going to be? And blessed are the peacemakers because they're not troublemakers. You know anybody who enjoys being a troublemaker? You might, but you don't enjoy people who like being around a troublemaker, do you? And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. You're not happy because you're persecuted, but you're happy because even though you're persecuted, you know you're standing for the right cause. And you know that's true. You may stand for something that's not popular, that people say is bad, but you know that's the right thing. And so bring the persecution on, because I'm not changing. You prove to me that what I believe is right is wrong, I'll change. But you try to beat me up for doing the right thing, I'm going to keep on doing the right thing. We're all that stubborn, aren't we? Yeah, we are. Now, I'm not stubborn. You're the most stubborn person here. Now, that makes a happy person according to Jesus. You're humble. You want to improve your bad situation. You got to learn self-control. If you can't control yourself, you can't defeat a city, Solomon said. You want to do the right thing. You want to be focused on your goal. And while you're going to that goal, you're kind to everyone else. You don't cause trouble, but you're a peacemaker. And if somebody wants to persecute you for living that kind of life, bring it on, because that's not what makes me happy. Okay? And so we see the same thing. Let's go back to our other key to happiness. Number one, steadfast loyalty to your cause. That's kind of what we read, wasn't it? You got to have a cause that's greater than yourself. Something to believe in besides you. A cause to fight for. A cause that can stir blood. A cause that can give life a purpose and direction. You know, it's sad that a lot of young men died in World War II for our country's freedom. But you know, they didn't die in vain. They died for us. And I suspect that as they went to the battlefield knowing they may not come out alive, that they thought, I'm fighting for America's freedom. I'm fighting for my mom and dad, my brothers and sisters. Somebody's got to step up and say, no more Hitler in America in the world anymore. They died for a cause, and to this day we're thankful for that generation. It's called the greatest generation. That's what it is to be a Christian. You're fighting for the cause of Christ. It's not a temporary freedom, it's an eternal freedom. You want to go to heaven and take as many with you as you can, and that freedom is going to last forever and ever and ever, and it will never be tarnished. So you need to be steadfast to your cause. 2 Timothy 4, 7, and 8, the Apostle Paul lived that kind of a life. And as he's sitting in prison at about the age of 60, ready to be executed by a crazy Caesar named Nero who wanted to kill Christians to hide his own wrongdoings, and Paul is sitting there saying, the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I've kept the faith. Therefore, there's a crown of righteousness which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me at that day. Did you hear those words? There's a crown, that's my goal, of life given by the righteous judge because I've done right. I'm still being persecuted for right. Another one of Solomon's little tidbits in the book of Ecclesiastes is, he said, another sad thing I've seen under the sun, that a righteous man can die for doing good, and a wicked man can prolong his life for doing evil. He said, all is vanity and vexation of the spirit. Boy, that's just not right, but it happens. And here's Paul as an example of that. I fought the good fight. What fight? Truth against error, right against wrong, God against the world. I've kept the faith. No matter how discouraging my life was, I didn't let outward circumstances affect my mind and what it believes. I've finished my course because I'm in prison about to die. There's nothing more I can do. I'm done. Paul lived the good life, and he wanted everybody else to live it too. The Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me at that day, and not to me only, but to all those who love his appearing. Do you think that sounds like a happy, depressed man who says, I wished I'd done different? No. Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. Get your priorities right and put God on the top of the list, and if you really live for the Lord, everything else will take care of itself. Philippians 3:13 and 14, Paul says, brethren, I do not consider myself to have attained, but this one thing I do. And here's another good piece of advice. Forgetting those things which are behind. Do you know how many people spent hours and days and weeks and sometimes years of their life with regret? Oh, if I could go back and do that over, I wouldn't do it the same. I know you wouldn't. I wouldn't either. But let's forget the past because you can't change it. Grieving over the past and the present is just wasting today. And so you make right whatever wrong you can make right, and then you drop it, close the door, and lock it, and don't open those thoughts anymore because they're not going to make you happy. Forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things which are before, I press onward toward the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Paul said, I'm keeping my mind on the goal, and it's a goal that takes me up and on and to victory. And that's what he got. Steadfast loyalty to your cause. Number 2, accepting life's minimal fortunes. Now, what does that mean? If you come into this world thinking the world owes you everything, that you ought to be rich and wealthy and happy and good looking and popular and all those things we talked about earlier, then if you don't get all those things, guess what? You're going to be so unhappy. And you're going to be hard to get along with. And nothing anybody says or does is going to make you feel better. And you're going to be miserable and make people around you miserable. What's wrong? Well, my life just didn't turn out the way I thought it would. How did you think it's going to turn out? Oh, good. I was going to have a good education, a great job, a great family. Everybody's just going to love and adore me. I was going to get rich, have a big house on the hill, fancy cars to drive. Everybody is coming to my mailbox to put letters in my mailbox saying, here's how wonderful you are. And then when everybody else dies, not me, I'm just going to be here forever. I kind of mock at that a little bit, but really that's kind of how we look at life sometimes as a young person. Just always going to go up. But if you keep paying attention, that's another piece of information Solomon tells in the book of Ecclesiastes. He said, got some bad news for you. The story doesn't end good. You're going to die. And when you die, nobody's going to remember you. If you think so, go out to the cemetery and see if you can find your great-great-grandparents. Most of us don't even know who they are. So what's the point? There we go. What's man's greatest good? If I'm going to die and everybody's going to forget me, what should I do while I'm here? Well, we're telling you. Accept life's minimal fortunes. Let me read this to you. Somebody said, and I'm not sure because I tried to Google this, and I got all these different answers as to who the original author was, so I'm not sure who it is. But you've heard the statement. Make thy claim of wages a zero, then hast thou the world at thy feet. In other words, expect a zero, and you'll always be happy because if you get one thing, you've gotten a whole lot more than you ever thought you were going to get. That's kind of what we're talking about here. And the Apostle Paul said in the New Testament that he could enjoy being wealthy or he could enjoy being poor. In the book of Philippians he said, I've learned how to abound and I've learned how to be abased. In all things I can do whatever I need to do through Christ who strengthens me. So what he's saying is outward circumstances do not make my happiness in life. And so that's Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11. But what he means also is what Ecclesiastes chapter 6 and verse 7. And I want to read a part of that for you. Hope you don't mind. In Ecclesiastes 6 and verse 7, Solomon, who had everything the world could offer, said, all the labor of man is for his mouth, yet his soul is not satisfied. You ever think about it that way? Why do you drive a nice car? Carry your body around in. Why do you wear nice clothes? To adorn your body. Why do you eat good food? To satisfy hunger. Why do you comb your hair the way you do? Wash and bathe? Well, because you want your body to feel good. So that's what Solomon's talking about. He says, I do all these things for the flesh. That's what we're supposed to do. But he said, it doesn't satisfy my soul. There's that empty, what about the rest of my life question that's still dwelling in there. So let me back up a little bit farther. Because he's kind of depressed in a way. He says, what more has the wise man than the fool? What does the poor man have who knows how to walk before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This is also vanity and grasping for the wind. Did you hear that last statement? Better is the sight of the eye than the wandering of desire. The wandering of desire is, well, I've got this, but I want that. Somebody said a bush in the hand is worth two in the bush, because if you try to get two in the bush, you lose the one in your hand, then you have nothing. And that's what Solomon's saying. Better to be happy with what you have than always wanting what's next. Well, you'll be miserable then for sure. But what's even more interesting is back up to verse 3 of Ecclesiastes 6. And he says, if a man begets 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with goodness, I say that a stillborn child is better than he. Solomon, what in the world? If a guy spends his whole life and has a big family and he just works like a dog and never enjoys life, he'd been better off to be stillborn. That's what he said. He said, for the stillborn comes in vanity and departs in darkness, and its name is covered with darkness. Though it has not seen the sun or known anything, it has more rest than the man, even if he lives 1,000 years twice, but has not seen goodness. Do not all go to one place? So you see, Solomon's saying you need to enjoy the good life. And he tells us at the end of the book what the good life is, and it's what we're describing here. And the last one is a bountiful appreciation of the wonders and beauties of life. Do you really pay attention to what good things you do have? How many of you got up this morning and said, it's raining outside and boy, do we need the rain? Go ahead and raise your hand. How many of you got up and said, oh, it's raining again and I hate rain? Anybody want to raise your hand on that one? Gabe, did you do that? You're smiling back there. Josh, you're smiling. Did I catch you? No, rain in August is a blessing. Because I looked out the window and I said, you know, these trees are greener than I've ever seen them in August. The grass is growing. Everything's beautiful, because come January and everything's dull and gray and dead, I don't like that. But you see, sometimes we just don't stop to smell the roses. And yet Solomon over and over again in the book of Ecclesiastes, and God in the New Testament said, I gave you the planet Earth with all the blessings and the fruit and the food and the good times and the seasons. I all gave them so you could enjoy life under the sun and be a happy person. But you and I have to take the time to pay attention to those things. Now, let me read a poem from Edgar Guest that kind of says that. And listen carefully, because it's called The Road of Happiness. He said, the roads of happiness are not the selfish roads of pleasure seeking, where cheeks are flushed with haste and hot, and none has time for kindly speaking. But they're the roads where lovers stray, where wives and husbands walk together. Children romp along the way whenever it's pleasant weather. Isn't that true? You know, you think at my age, you look back like the times me and Emily and our kids all walked down the road, and sure, a little bit of nature was a good time. The roads of happiness are trod by simple folks and tender-hearted, by gentle folks that worship God and want to live their days unparted. There, kindly people stop and talk, regardless of the chase for money. There, arm in arm, the grown-ups walk. And every eye you see is sunny. The roads of happiness are lined not with friends of royal splendor, but with the loyal friends and kind that do the gentle deeds and tender. There, fame has never brought unrest, nor glory set men's hearts to aching. There, unabandoned, is life's best for selfish love and money making. The roads of happiness are those that do not lead to pomp and glory, but wind among the joys and woes that make the humble toiler's story. The roads that oft we used to tread in early days when first we mated, when hearts were light and cheeks were red, and days were not with burdens freighted. And amen to that. Somebody said a long time ago, the best things in life are free. And that's life, love of your family, and the pursuit of the joys of life day by day. So, you know, you have to take time to enjoy the wonders of life. God put them here for your benefit. And if you don't take the time and you just spend your life working, trying to get ahead, trying to get smart and do this, that, you lose out on life, and all of a sudden your life's over. You think, what have I done with my life? I've wasted it when I should have been spending it with the people I love and who love me. Happiness comes from looking in the right place, because we saw that happiness doesn't come from pleasure, popularity, or wealth. Happiness comes from making the right choices. Right off the bat, as a young person, you get to choose, do I want to spend my life trying to accumulate everything I can, whether it's money or power or a job or a position, or do I want to go through life and be able to succeed but also enjoy my life? And happiness comes from pursuing happiness that provides lasting good. As the philosopher I read from at the beginning of the lesson said, happiness requires you to make choices, to discipline yourself, both morally, spiritually, mentally, and physically. He said you can have fun, but that's not to be confused with true happiness. I can agree with that. So the question is this morning, are you happy? If not, I hope you'll take the time to learn how to be happy, and that you'll believe like I do that happiness comes from serving God, because that's why He put us here. If you'll give your life and your heart and your soul to Jesus Christ, He will bless you with all the things of this earth that you'll ever need. You just have to serve Him first. Make that the cause worth fighting for. And that fight will last the whole rest of your life, and you'll be blessed with a crown of righteousness in eternity. And you'll never get bored with life, because there's always a battle to be fought on the cause of what's right. So this morning, if you'd like to give your life to Jesus Christ, so Christ can give you all of this life's blessings back to you, and also eternal life besides, then won't you come while we stand and sing?